South African leader Jacob Zuma is forced to deny he let a family of wealthy industrialists hand out positions in his cabinet. It's one of a growing number of scandals that threatens to undo his presidency. Is Zuma presiding over a corrupt system of patronage in South Africa? And how are his scandals affecting the future of the ANC and the country? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Mike Hanna. Jacob Zuma has over the years proven himself to be the ultimate political survivor. Implicated in scandal after scandal, South Africa's president always manages to come out on top. But now Mr. Zuma is facing perhaps his biggest controversy yet, challenged on his relationship with the wealthy and influential Gupta family, who hold a range of business interests in South Africa. This week, South Africa's Deputy Finance Minister, Mcebisi Jonas, said members of the Gupta family offered him the top ministerial post. This was after Finance Minister Nhlanhla Nene was sacked. Nene was a respected figure in the government, but had a difficult relationship with Zuma, and his sacking was highly controversial. The whole saga has now focused attention on the president's alleged network of patronage. The ANC's Secretary-General has said South Africa risks becoming a mafia state unless corruption is dealt with. Critics say the Gupta's influence over Zuma is a threat to democracy. The immigrant family moved from India to South Africa in 1993, and they own a business empire, including everything from mining to computer technology. President Zuma's son is the director of one of those companies. His wife and one of his daughters have also worked for Gupta businesses. And the Gupta's wealth has allegedly bought them certain privileges. In 2013, they had wedding guests fly into a military facility normally used for heads of state. Those passengers also bypassed national immigration checks. And former ANC Member of Parliament, Fakkie Mentor, says the Guptas offered her a cabinet post in 2010, 5 years before they allegedly offered Jonas the same. Lots to discuss. We'll introduce our guests in just a moment. But first, Famida Miller sets up the story for us from Johannesburg.
The top leadership body of the African National Congress, the National Executive Committee, begins deliberations this weekend around a number of party issues. But top of the agenda are the damning allegations against President Jacob Zuma, which have surfaced over the last few days. Now, the ANC remains adamant that the president won't be recalled. But what would be of concern to the president are the reported factions within his party, one that supports him and one that doesn't. The party's Secretary General, Gwede Mantashe, has come out to say that no one within the party is untouchable, including the president. He says he also expects further details and perhaps more allegations to come out in the coming days. Bizarrely enough, there are those within the party who also say that the whistleblower in this case should be removed from his position and that these allegations against the president are politically motivated. Whatever the situation within the ANC and its internal politics, this is a period where the ANC will have to make important decisions about its future and that of the country.
Well, let's now bring in our guests. Joining me here in the studio in Doha is Khatija Patel, co-founder and managing editor of the online news outlet The Daily Vox. In Pretoria, Somadoda Fikeni, policy and political scientist. And in Cape Town via Skype is Richard Calland, associate professor in the public law department at the University of Cape Town and author of The Zuma Years. Welcome to you all. Richard Calland, let's get right to the point. What is the nature of the relationship between Jacob Zuma and the Gupta family?
Well, it's very clear now that it's a close relationship. They have been long-time benefactors of the President of South Africa, and through his son, Duduzane, and other close colleagues and confidants of the President, they have built up a network of business interests and patronage in and around the President and his family, which is really highly corrosive. And the phrase that people are using in the higher echelons of the African National Congress, the ruling party, is the notion of state capture. That is to say, the idea that private interests, such as those of the Guptas, have in a sense, taken control of important institutions of state. And the big breaking news this week was when the Deputy Minister of Finance had the courage to come forward and attest to the fact that, in fact, he had been approached by the Gupta family, not by the presidency or anyone in politics, and offered the job of finance minister shortly before the previous finance minister was summarily dismissed, so shockingly, on the 9th of December last year, an event that we're now in South Africa referring to as 9/12.
Well, Somadoda Fikeni, this system of patronage appears to have been on the rise ever since Jacob Zuma took over as the country's president back in 2009. Would you agree?
I would certainly agree. This problem was always there, but on a lesser scale. And that was so because in the initial phase, you did have a leader with moral presence and a group of elders like Nelson Mandela and his cohort of leaders. At that time, I think they had the muscle to resist or to even punish anyone who would demonstrate these tendencies. But in the early 2000s, that's when we begin to see the turning point of this insidious relationship between business and politics. And since 2007, it seemed to have taken on a different platform altogether. Hence, we talk of the state capture at this moment.
Well, Khatija Patel, the ANC has historically been such a disciplined organization. It prided itself on its levels of control and on its transparency a large number of times. Is the organization itself transforming into something that is not better?
I think that this is a struggle that the ANC itself and various what is now called factions of the ANC are grappling with, really. This is a transformation of the party going forward, because we are seeing a transformation, really, of South African politics, a realignment of South African politics with the introduction of the EFF and and the apparent support for the EFF that is increasing. So I think that the ANC itself and various factions, or what we're calling factions within the ANC, are grappling with exactly this. How exactly is this party transforming? What exactly is the nature of the ANC? And who are the people who are going to be leading the ANC into this new day? I think that is what the ANC itself is grappling with at the moment. And certainly what we're seeing, I think, over the last few days is that certain members within the party are now beginning to speak out and saying that they don't like the direction in which the party is headed. That is basically where we're at, I think.
I'm going to return to that point in a moment, but Richard Calland, I just want to get back to you mentioning the Mcebisi Jonas being approached by the Guptas shortly before Nhlanhla Nene was fired. Now, Nene, in turn, was in dispute with Zuma, it was alleged, over procurement of nuclear power, something in which the Guptas had a close interest because of their company, Shiva Uranium. Now, it doesn't take a genius to connect the dots here, does it?
It doesn't, and this is a picture that's been emerging over a period of time. The president has been pushing very hard for South Africa to procure nuclear power, even at a time when demand for our energy, for energy needs has been declining and the cost of renewables has been falling. So the 2010 assessment was that we needed 9,600 milliwatts of nuclear energy, but that's no longer the case. The president, nonetheless, has continued to push very hard for a very quick procurement process, and there have been numerous rumors of numerous meetings between him and President Putin. The final piece of the jigsaw, then, is the Gupta piece, which is their uranium mine that you refer to. And, of course, they would stand to benefit hugely. It would turn probably an unprofitable business into a highly profitable business, were South Africa to procure nuclear power and to have to build nuclear power stations with the Russians or indeed with someone else. And the suspicion is that this is not only about Guptas, but also about lining and feathering the nest of Mr. Zuma as he approaches his twilight years in politics.
Well, Somadoda Fikeni, to return to the point brought up by Khatija Patel, the whole issue of what is the ANC's response? Now, we know that they are holding their NEC meeting this weekend. We also know that Gwede Mantashe, the Secretary General, said that the ANC was not consulted when the Finance Minister, Nene, was fired. making very clear that he's on the opposite side of Jacob Zuma in this particular dispute. Would that be the correct assumption?
Certainly, at this stage, it is clear that between the President and the Secretary General, their perspectives on how to handle this matter are different. And at another level, the ANC alliance partners, such as the South African Communist Party, it has taken a very clear direction to challenge the Gupta family on this particular matter and challenge some of the leaders within the ANC. And we should be reminded that the Secretary General, Gwede Mantashe, comes from the ranks of the SACP or South African Communist Party leadership.
Well, that's a very important point, Khatija. We're talking about the partners of the ANC, the union movement, the South African Communist Party. Now, that relationship has been pretty corroded in recent years. Now, this particular issue is something that some believe could deliver the death blow to that relationship.
I think what's interesting is that when Thabo Mbeki, former President Thabo Mbeki was recalled, one of the reasons, at least the public reasons offered for that recall, was that the alliance members were not being consulted and were not engaged in the decisions that were being taken at that time. But I think what we've been seeing under Jacob Zuma is just a continuation of that, to such a point where I think we're seeing, well, COSATU is almost non-entity now, the trade union federation, and then we're seeing the SACP as well. That shows signs of really trying to hit back against what is clearly an movement to undermine them entirely within the alliance. So there is I think a great awareness among the alliance partners about what is happening, and I think that going forward, the pushback is going to be led by them. I think already in the media, for example, yesterday we saw an SACP leader commenting, saying that they take this very, very seriously, and that they are demanding an investigation into the Gupta family. They want a public investigation. They also, people are calling for some kind of tribunal for people to come up and be granted some kind of immunity for testifying about the extent to which this family does control things within the state. So, and these, I think, significantly, again, this is coming from the SACP itself. So there are tensions there. And I think that a lot of these tensions are not new, but certainly Jacob Zuma has a lot to do, and I think perhaps somebody like Richard can speak more about how many of the people who had rallied behind Zuma and through the years right up to now, he seems now to have lost the support of many of the people who put him in power. I think and that's quite significant now.
Well, Richard Kelland, yes, I'd like to put that point to you.
Well, Khatija is absolutely right. The balance of power is tilting against President Zuma. It's been tilting steadily over the last year, but it really gained momentum in December with that extraordinary and irrational decision to dismiss Nhlanhla Nene, who was a well-respected Minister of Finance, but was standing up to Mr. Zuma, as we've said, on nuclear power and other important issues of governance. Now, when that happened, the ANC Secretary-General, Gwede Mantashe, was asked on the evening of the 9th of December what the ANC view was. He said, the ANC has no view because we were not consulted. Now, that was an extraordinary admission by him that the ANC had not been spoken to by the president, who thereby committed a cardinal sin in ANC culture, in not consulting the rest of the leadership of the ANC. And I think at that moment, his power with certainly the top 6 leaders of the ANC began to evaporate. And since then, Mr. Mantashe has, on a number of occasions, come out very firmly in public in support of the finance minister who's now at the helm of government, running things from Treasury, and that's Mr. Pravin Gordhan. Minister Gordhan gave a very brilliant budget speech 2 weeks ago in which he really laid down a line in the sand, saying to Mr. Zuma himself, no more, we've got to clean up our act.
I just want to stay with you for a moment, Richard Kelland. Now, when Jacob Zuma was head of the ANC's intelligence department, there were many who alleged that he was ruthless, that the affable charm that he displays in public that has become his signature in recent years doesn't fully portray what is a very strong and ruthless streak within the man. He's not a person who's likely to go quietly, is he?
No, he's not, partly because, as you say, his character is such that he's a fighter. He's regarded as one of the bravest liberation fighters in the ANC during the years of apartheid. Unfortunately, that characteristic in government at a time when someone is under severe pressure may not be such a useful instinct. He's not going to quietly resign unless the ANC leadership and the National Executive Committee, who meet this weekend in a make or break meeting for Mr. Zuma, decide that he should go, a la Mr. Mbeki, President Mbeki, back in September 2008, who you may recall was ruthlessly removed by the ANC, 9 months short of his final term of office as president of this country. We may be approaching something like that, but with Mr. Zuma it's different. A, he's a fighter, as we've discussed, but B, he has another skin in the game, which is this. He's facing the possibility of a re-prosecution for the corruption charges that were dropped rather curiously and rather abruptly in March 2009, shortly before he was elected president of the country.
Well, Somadoda Fikeni, what is the ANC likely to do? It appears that what they need to deliberate this weekend, bearing in mind that local elections are going to be held within coming months, whether Jacob Zuma will be a greater liability as the leader of the party during these local elections, or whether the organization should get rid of him before these elections happen and demonstrate its insistence that it wants to remove all corruption from inside the party and the government. Which way are they likely to go?
Given the divisions within the National Executive Committee of the ANC itself, as you hear the pronouncements quite contradicting each other on this matter, it is unlikely that those who may want him to go will have sufficient numbers. Therefore, they may opt for a compromise, which, among other things, could be a dedicated investigation of some of these claims. But also it will not be long from now before the Constitutional Court also rules on the issue of the home of the president, which had an upgrade, which seemed to have had a lot of corrupt dealings in it. So again, ANC will be under pressure to act, or opposition parties are most likely going to explore the legal routes to force the ANC.
Well, Khatija Patel, there we had mention of the Nhlanhla scandal. We had mention of the fact that a corruption trial against Zuma may be rearing its head again. There seems to be odds stacking up against his continued leadership of the party, is it not?
Absolutely. He seems to be running out of luck, really. He seemed to be living a charmed life for the longest time. But certainly right now, with all of these things stacking up against him, his legal challenges piling up, on top of the fact that he seems to be losing support very quickly as well, and key members within the ANC, like Gwede Mantashe, who seem to be leading the charge against him, really. I think that he is in a very, very difficult spot. I still don't believe that the ANC, are going to move for a recall at this time. Certainly not immediately, considering that we're heading into a local election. It might be a gamble, but at the same time, I think that what we are going to be seeing coming out of the NEC meeting is a move from the ANC to mitigate the influence of the Gupta family into the state, but also to control the presidency better from Luthuli House.
Well, Somadoda Fikeni, that particular point there, that one of the options of the ANC might be to assert greater control of the presidency, to take back some of the powers that has been usurped from the ANC itself. Do you think that is a possibility?
It is a high possibility. Remember that President Jacob Zuma came back and won against Thabo Mbeki because one of the charges was that Thabo Mbeki had become aloof from the ANC and he had over-governmentalized decisions. Right now we are seeing exactly the same thing. Therefore, ANC may try to reassert itself. They may try to check some of the decisions, and they may even try to reassert themselves in the deployment of some of the ANC cadres.
Well, once again, Richard Calland, I want to return to, you made mention of the current Finance Minister, Pravin Gordhan. Now, there appears to be an increasing conflict between him and Jacob Zuma. Gordhan, as you said, made a brilliant budget speech, sounding almost presidential himself at that particular point. And here we have as well news that a police unit is now investigating the man for activities when he was head of the Inland Revenue Department. This appears to be going into a rather nasty behind-the-scenes conflict, does it not?
It's very delicately poised, and it's delicately poised at a time when the country is on negative watch in terms of the ratings agencies. That's important in and of itself, but the effect of the country being downgraded to junk status would be terribly bad for the economy, and particularly for the poorest. With 40% unemployment in this country and a fiscal squeeze already on public expenditure, the effect of junk status would be really very bad. Mr. Gordhan realizes that. The left of the ANC realizes it. And the moderate middle are now grouping together with Gordhan as its leader to really give voice to the anti-Zuma camp, as it were. The fact that Mr. Zuma has fought back, waging a proxy war through this police unit that he has control of, is evidence to my mind that this is a game on, that there's a real tussle here, that Mr. Gordhan is being taken seriously and that Mr. Zuma is fighting for his political life.
Khatija Patel mentioned there of a group of moderates within the ANC coming in behind the finance minister. That appears to be astute observation.
Absolutely. I think that again, the ANC realizes that it has to take control of what is happening in order to survive this, in order to survive the havoc that Zuma and his various associates have wreaked on the party. This party has been significantly weakened, but also times are changing, and the political situation in South Africa is changing. This is why the ANC, the various factions or the various political positionings within the party realize that this is a crucial moment that has really been offered to the ANC to take back control of the party and to decide what exactly is the character of the ANC and how exactly do they want to assert that character in what is currently happening. That is, I think that's what happens. I think the ANC historically, Mike, you'd know this, has been very good at rallying together in times of crisis, and I think this is that kind of moment when we'll see the ANC, we'll see all the bickering really, coming to, or at least being put to the sides for a short while in order for them to, to combat this, but also with a view of the local election coming up. So I think that is really important, that the ANC is under pressure, not just in the press or in Parliament, but also that there is, there's significant concern from the party itself that it's, that it could lose the major metropoles in Johannesburg, Pretoria, and even Nelson Mandela Bay, which is Port Elizabeth. So there is more than just, sort of the chattering class pressure. There is real pressure against the dominance of the ANC, and I think the party has to come together in that way, in the way that Richard describes here, having the various the moderate, the moderates and the leftists within the party come together and look at what the problem is and take it from there.
Richard Calland, very, very quickly. Is the ANC ripe for purging itself? Is it able to purge itself?
It really depends who you talk to. There are reformers, there are progressives in the party who honestly believe that the ability of the ANC to regenerate itself is something it's proved many times in the past. Only time will tell. This weekend is an important staging post in that process, in finding out whether the ANC has it within itself to contain or indeed perhaps take the ultimate step of removing Mr. Zuma from power. Certainly at least half the leadership of the ANC, if not more, feel that enough is enough and that things have to look up and be improved.
Well, on that note, thanks to all our guests, Khatija Patel, Somadoda Fakeni and Richard Calland. And thank you too for watching. You can see the program again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. Or visit us on Twitter @AJ Inside Story is our handle. From me, Mike Hanna, and the rest of the team here, goodbye for now.